Mom mortgaged her home to battle me in court, just to protect my brother. The call came late, a whisper of a promise I knew was a lie. My brother, a convicted pedophile, was out of prison. And my mother, my own mother, was willing to mortgage her house and destroy our family to bring him back into my daughter's lives. Patrick, my brother, had served 5 years for assaulting a 7-year-old. 5 years. And the moment he was released, my entire family launched an unrelenting campaign, insisting I let him near my 3 little girls. My oldest had just turned 8, the same age as Patrick's victim. There was no way I was allowing a convicted pedophile anywhere near them. Mom called me 17 times that day. I knew exactly what she wanted before I even picked up. 4 months. She'd been carefully conditioning me with talk of forgiveness and second chances, but my daughter's safety was not up for debate. When she arrived at my doorstep the morning of his release, she had a whole speech prepared about Patrick's transformation, his newfound faith, even a folder filled with certificates from jail programs. He finished every course they offered, she declared, as if a few certificates could erase the horror he'd inflicted. Where is your Christian heart? My response was simple. Cold. He was not welcome. Not for supper, not for the holidays, not for 5 minutes. My girls came first. Mom's face shifted from pleading to outright fury. Those are his nieces, she spat. You are depriving him of his family. The guilt campaign began immediately. My sister, Beth, called, sobbing about Patrick having nowhere to go. Every morning, Dad would send me Bible verses about forgiveness. Even Aunt Helen, who lived 3 states away, felt compelled to remind me that everyone deserved a second chance. But they saved the real manipulation for Sunday dinner. I'd only stopped by Mom's to pick up my grandmother's ring, which she'd been resizing. The whole family was there, and so was Patrick. He sat at the kitchen table, a phantom in human form, as if he hadn't ruined a child's innocence. My daughter, Elise, spotted him first. Uncle Patrick, she shrieked, dashing towards him before I could even blink, her sisters close behind. I moved faster than I ever had in my life, scooping up all 3 girls and practically running for the door. Patrick had the audacity to look hurt. I only wanted to meet them, he said. So softly, so innocently. I'm their uncle. That was it. That was the moment I shattered. I spun around, my voice trembling with a rage I barely recognized. Being blood does not give you access to my children, I snarled, reminding everyone in that room exactly what he was guilty of. My own mother physically covered her ears. Dad grumbled something about lingering in the past, and Beth accused me of traumatizing the girls. I stood there, utterly speechless, watching my family choose denial over decency. The smear campaign began the very next day. Mom told her church I was keeping her grandchildren from her, conveniently leaving out why. Beth posted cryptic messages on Facebook about atonement. Relatives I barely knew sent prayer hands and Bible quotes. My phone was inundated with messages from strangers who didn't even know the situation. Then Patrick started showing up. At the grocery store. At the park. Always maintaining distance. Always claiming coincidence. Waving to my girls from across the playground. I started documenting everything. Date, time, location, witnesses. After we caught him driving by our house 3 times in one day, my husband installed security cameras. We were living under siege. The breaking point, Jane's 8th birthday party. We'd rented the community center, invited her entire class. Halfway through the cake, Patrick walked in, a gift in hand. Mom trailed behind him, beaming as if she'd orchestrated a miracle. Every girl deserves an uncle on her birthday, she announced. Parents started snatching their children away. One father recognized Patrick from the sex offender registry website. Within minutes, my daughter's party was utterly destroyed. Jane cried inconsolably in the restroom, while parents murmured darkly in the parking lot. The gift he brought? A doll dressed in a swimming costume. I filed for a restraining order the next morning. That's when the real war began. Mom spent her retirement savings to hire Patrick a lawyer. They claimed I was alienating him from his family. The lawyer argued Patrick had served his sentence and deserved to see his relatives. My mother testified against me. The judge granted a temporary order, but warned it might not last long. Patrick had finished probation. He wasn't technically breaking any rules by merely being near us. The final hearing was scheduled for next month. Meanwhile, the harassment escalated. Dad began showing up at my husband's workplace. Beth tried to pick up the girls from school, claiming I'd asked her to. The school had to remove my entire family from the permitted pickup list. Even family I hadn't spoken to in years took sides. Last night, I caught Elise going through old Christmas photos on my phone. "Why don't we see Uncle Patrick anymore?" she asked, her voice small. "Grandma says you're being rude to him." I wanted to shout. Instead, I just hugged her tightly, changing the subject, but I knew this was far from over. The final hearing was in 2 weeks, and Mom had made it crystal clear she'd mortgaged her house to fight me. That's when the horrifying reality truly hit. How far this would go, how utterly relentless they were. I knew I had to get ahead of whatever Mom was planning. Her mortgage threat wasn't empty. She'd already blown her retirement savings on Patrick's lawyer. I started calling every family law attorney in town, scheduling consultations, hoping to conflict them out. My husband took time off work, and we enrolled the girls in after-school programs to reduce the chance of unexpected family visits. After Beth's pickup attempt, the principal agreed to personally escort them to the bus. By the way, if you're still with me and this story has you on the edge of your seat, please hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming, and you won't want to miss them. 3 days later, my cousin Cheryl, who had always remained neutral, called asking to meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Cheryl looked utterly exhausted as she sat across from me. She glanced around nervously before pulling out her phone. "I need to show you something," she whispered, scrolling through her texts. "Your mother, she's been organizing the family. There's a group chat." My stomach fell as I read the messages. 23 family members were actively plotting methods to force Patrick and my daughters to communicate. They talked about showing up at school activities, accidentally running into us at the supermarket, even having various relatives petition for grandparent rights to legally overwhelm me. Cheryl slid her phone back into her purse. "The worst part was how they talked about you," she said, her voice barely audible. "Mentally unstable, vindictive, poisoning your children." Mom convinced them all Patrick's conviction was a misunderstanding, that the girls' family overreacted. She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "I have kids, too. I checked the court records. It was not a misunderstanding." I spent the rest of the day screenshotting everything Cheryl sent me. The group conversation revealed their entire playbook. They planned to load the courtroom with supporting family members, including aunts and uncles with prepared character letters for Patrick. Mom had even persuaded my childhood pediatrician to write about how devoted Patrick had been. That evening, I spotted Patrick's truck parked across from our house again, this time with Mom by his side. They sat there for an hour, just watching. When my husband went outside to confront them, they drove away, only to return the next morning. The girls noticed the tension. Jane asked why we couldn't eat at restaurants anymore. Our lawyer suggested the repeated surveillance could strengthen our case, but cautioned that family court judges often favored reconciliation. Patrick had completed his sentence. The system regarded him as rehabilitated. A week before the hearing, as I was carrying groceries, I saw a woman observing me from across the parking lot. Elise asked why Grandma couldn't babysit anymore, and I gave vague excuses. "Kids are smart, though." They sensed something was wrong. The woman approached as I locked my trunk, introducing herself as Patricia from Child Protective Services. Someone had filed a report about me, denying my children access to family. My hands shook as I gave her my lawyer's contact information. Patricia was professional but thorough. Our lawyer subpoenaed the CPS complaint, which alleged emotional abuse through family alienation. The home visit went well. The girls' rooms were clean, the fridge stocked, their artwork covered the walls. They chatted happily with Patricia about school and friends. But I knew this was just another tactic to wear me down. It was no surprise the complaint had come from Mom's address, as she'd formerly accused me of emotional abuse for protecting my children from a convicted pedophile. The irony would have been laughable if it hadn't been so terrifying. As the hearing approached, Patrick became more daring, jogging past our house every morning, always careful to stay on public property, waving at the windows, knowing the girls might see. I kept them away from the front rooms, but it meant living like prisoners in our own home. Dad left voicemails about how I was destroying the family. Beth sent long, rambling emails about forgiveness and healing. Relatives I'd blocked created new social media accounts to message me. They all sang the same tune. I was cruel, unreasonable, and unchristian. Then came the letters. Mom orchestrated a campaign where family members wrote directly to my daughters. I intercepted every one addressed to them at our house. But the violation felt profound. They were attempting to manipulate my children directly. I read each letter before shredding it. They all followed a template. How much they missed the girls, how sad Uncle Patrick was, how Mommy was keeping them apart. One aunt even included photos of Patrick looking dejected. Another sent drawings Patrick had allegedly made for them in prison. My husband installed additional locks and an alarm system. We changed our routes to school and activities. I started grocery shopping in the neighboring town. We basically went into hiding while living in our own house. The weekend before court, Mom made her biggest move yet. She filed for emergency grandparent visitation rights, painting me as an unstable mother who had cut off family access without cause. She demanded immediate supervised visits with the girls, with Patrick allowed to attend as their uncle. Our lawyer called it a kitchen sink approach. Throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. The emergency petition would be heard alongside our restraining order request. Mom was clearly hoping a judge would compromise, denying the restraining order but granting her some visitation. I spent that weekend organizing evidence. Security footage, documentation of every encounter, group chat screenshots, character references from teachers and doctors who actually knew us. The morning of the hearing arrived, gray and drizzling. I dressed carefully, conservatively, but not severely. My husband wore his only suit. We dropped the girls off at school early, my stomach churning at leaving them, even with the new security measures. The courthouse parking lot was full of familiar cars. Patrick sat in the front row of the courtroom with Mom and their lawyer, dressed in a new suit, a fresh haircut. He looked like a respectable uncle, not someone on the sex offender registry. I recognized aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends who stood in clusters, whispering and giving us dark looks as we passed. Mom dabbed her eyes dramatically with a tissue, the image of a grieving grandmother. Our side of the courtroom was nearly empty, just us, our lawyer, and surprisingly Cheryl. She gave me a small nod as we took our seats. Whatever happened today, I wouldn't let them win. When the judge entered, I gripped my husband's hand. Everything we'd fought for came down to this moment. My daughter's safety was at stake, and I was prepared to fight with everything I had. The judge's gavel struck the bench, and the hearings began. Our lawyer presented the security tape first, showing Patrick's persistent surveillance of our home. The timestamps suggested a pattern of escalating conduct. Mom's lawyer countered, arguing that a man had the right to jog on public streets. During the first recess, I noticed Beth in the hallway, making phone calls, glancing at me while whispering urgently. My husband stayed close, his hand on my back as we navigated through clusters of hostile relatives. When Mom took the stand, she painted herself as a heartbroken grandmother denied access to her grandchildren. Our lawyer's cross-examination revealed the reality beneath her facade. She showed images of happier times, family gatherings where Patrick played with relatives, and her tears seemed genuine as she detailed how I had torn the family apart. When asked directly about Patrick's conviction, Mom claimed the victim's family had blown things out of proportion, and Patrick had simply been showing affection. Several relatives in the gallery nodded along with her delusions. The judge ordered a brief recess to review evidence. In the hallway, Dad cornered my husband near the water fountain. I watched his face turn green as Dad gestured wildly, clearly attempting to pressure him into dropping the case. My husband simply walked away, leaving Dad fuming. Cheryl testified next, bringing printouts of the group chat messages. Mom's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed them as evidence of coordinated harassment. Cheryl's hands trembled as she read aloud their plans to ambush us at various locations. Patrick took the stand later that afternoon. He couldn't explain why he'd chosen to jog past our house and stumbled when asked about the birthday party intrusion. He'd clearly been coached, speaking softly about rehabilitation and redemption, claiming he just wanted to be a part of his niece's lives, to watch them grow up. His calm demeanor cracked when confronted with the victim impact statement from his case. During the lunch break, I discovered Mom had arranged for several church members to be present. They filled an entire row, wearing matching crosses and shooting disapproving looks my way. One woman I recognized from Mom's Bible study group actually hissed at me in the bathroom. The CPS investigation results were then presented. Patricia herself testified that she'd found no evidence of abuse or neglect and that the children were thriving and well-adjusted. Mom's lawyer tried to spin this as evidence that the girls needed their extended family, but it fell flat. My testimony came last. I detailed every incident, every violation of boundaries, every attempt to manipulate my daughters, as well as the letters they'd sent directly to them. I explained how we changed our entire lives to avoid Patrick stalking. Mom's lawyer accused me of being paranoid and controlling, implying that I was using my children as weapons in a family feud. I remained calm, sticking to facts and documentation. The judge announced that he would review all evidence and make a decision within 3 days. Patrick made his move as we left the courtroom, stepping directly into my path, forcing me to stop. His eyes held a coldness that chilled me, and he leaned close enough for only me to hear his whispered threat about seeing the girls soon. My husband immediately positioned himself between us, and our lawyer documented the interaction. Patrick stepped back with a smirk, rejoining Mom and their attorney. The threat was subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, but the message was clear. That evening, we found our mailbox stuffed with letters from various relatives condemning our actions and demanding reconciliation. Someone had also left a Bible on our doorstep with specific verses about forgiveness highlighted in yellow. The next morning brought new challenges. Jane's teacher called to report that Beth had shown up at school claiming a family emergency. The school had followed our protocols and denied her access, but Beth had created a scene that upset several students. I drove to the school right away to speak with the principal, who showed me security footage of Beth arguing with the front desk staff and demanding to take the girls. When denied, she burst into tears. The principal assured me they would keep a close eye on things but suggested we look into another school. The situation was causing havoc, and other parents were concerned. I left feeling defeated, knowing that Mom's campaign was working exactly as intended. At home, I found my husband installing additional cameras. He'd taken the rest of the week off work after Dad showed up there again, this time with Uncle Helen's husband, and they'd attempted to corner him in the parking lot during lunch. Cheryl called that afternoon with disturbing news. The family group chat had turned into planning sessions for after the judge's decision. They talked about filing multiple legal actions to drain our resources, and some suggested showing up at the girls' activities to establish unintentional contact. I spent hours documenting these new threats for our lawyer. Each piece of evidence felt like another weight on my shoulders. The girls sensed the tension, becoming clingy and anxious. Elise had started having nightmares, but she couldn't explain what scared her. Patrick escalated further 2 days after the hearing when he showed up at the grocery store where I was shopping with the girls. He didn't approach directly, but instead positioned himself where the girls would see him, waving enthusiastically and calling out their names. I rushed the girls out, abandoning our cart. Jane asked why we were leaving without our groceries. Elise asked why we couldn't talk to Uncle Patrick. Their innocent questions broke my heart as I struggled to explain without frightening them. That night, we discovered someone had been in our backyard. Nothing was taken or damaged, but our daughter's outdoor toys had been rearranged, their playhouse door was open, and 3 wrapped presents had been left inside. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during that exact time frame. My husband called the police while I checked every lock and window. The officers took a report, but explained that without proof of forced entry or footage, there was little they could do. The gifts contained dolls dressed in bathing suits, like the one from Jane's party. The psychological warfare was taking its toll. I jumped at every sound, checked locks obsessively, and barely slept. My husband began working from home to maintain constant vigilance. We were prisoners in our own lives, exactly what Mom and Patrick wanted. The morning of the judge's decision arrived with a thunderstorm. We dressed carefully again, preparing for either outcome. I'd arranged for a trusted friend from my mother's group to watch the girls, someone completely disconnected from my family. The courthouse was even busier than before. In the courtroom, Patrick sat between Mom and their lawyer, dressed in a new suit, as if they were attending a wedding rather than attempting to force children to be near a predator. Mom had rallied additional supporters, including several prominent church members who wore color-coordinated outfits and carried signs promoting family unity. Mom clutched a handkerchief dramatically as the judge entered with a thick folder of documents and began reviewing the case. It was clear that someone had missed the memo on what family unity entails. He mentioned Patrick's completed sentence and rehabilitation programs, as well as the evidence of stalking, coordinated harassment, and a CPS complaint that appeared retaliatory. I felt my heart racing as he talked about the balance between protecting children and maintaining family bonds, citing cases where courts had reunified families after criminal convictions. Every word felt like another step toward losing everything we'd fought for. The judge's decision was mixed. He did extend the restraining order for a year, citing the stalking behavior and harassment. The security footage showed clear patterns of stalking. The group chat messages showed coordinated harassment. The birthday party incident demonstrated blatant disregard for boundaries. Mom's side erupted in whispers and movement. Others appeared satisfied with the partial victory. Patrick's face showed fury beneath his calm facade. However, he also granted Mom limited grandparent visitation rights, 1 supervised hour per month at a neutral location, with Patrick strictly barred from attending. Beth stopped us in the hallway as we were about to leave. Our lawyer explained that the restraining order was now more difficult to challenge, and the supervised visitation gave us more control over the situation. We pushed through with our lawyer's assistance, ignoring shouted questions about denying children their family. Security intervened when Beth grabbed my arm, attempting to force me to listen, and her removal caused another scene of stares and whispers. We had won the main battle, but it had come at a high cost. Mom had her foot in the door now, and Patrick would undoubtedly use her visits to maintain indirect contact. Despite the security cameras, we discovered more gifts on our porch when we arrived home. This time, 3 identical necklaces with heart pendants. The message was clear: Patrick wasn't giving up. He'd simply found new ways to violate boundaries while technically following the court order. That evening, our lawyer called with concerning news. Mom's attorney had already filed paperwork requesting expanded visitation, claiming the supervised visits were overly restrictive and harmful to the grandmother-grandchild relationship. After the girls had gone to bed, my husband and I discussed our next steps, including relocating, changing schools, and even officially changing our names. It felt impossible to safeguard our daughters while keeping their lives normal. Cheryl texted screenshots from the family chat, where they were celebrating Mom's partial victory and strategizing how to use the visits strategically. Some suggested having Patrick unexpectedly appear at the visitation location, while others talked about wearing recording devices to gather evidence against me. The next morning brought new challenges. Jane's best friend's mother called to politely uninvite her from a sleepover because word had spread about the courthouse drama and Patrick's presence on the registry. She was sorry, but she had to think of all the children's safety. I understood her position, but Jane's face crumbled when I explained. My husband's parents, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, finally called to offer their support, but suggested that we might be handling things too harshly. Jane couldn't understand why she was being punished for adult problems, and Elise and our youngest became whiny and difficult as a result. Their well-meaning ignorance hurt more than outright hostility. We spent the week establishing new routines around the court orders. I met with the supervised visitation coordinator to establish strict protocols. No gifts, no photos, no messages to relay. Mom would have exactly 60 minutes under professional supervision. The first visit was scheduled for the following week. I carefully prepared the girls, explaining that Grandma would visit them at a special location. They seemed excited but confused about the restrictions. Jane asked if Uncle Patrick would be there as well, and my heart sank at having that conversation again. Meanwhile, Patrick found legal ways to stay in our lives. He volunteered at community events we'd previously attended and joined organizations where we had memberships, always keeping the required distance but ensuring we knew he was there. Dad escalated his own campaign, showing up at my husband's workplace despite warnings, waiting in the parking lot with Bible verses and printed articles about forgiveness. Security eventually barred him from the property, but he simply moved to the public sidewalk. Beth began her own harassment via social media, creating multiple accounts to message our friends, sharing her version of events. She painted me as mentally unstable, claiming I was denying my children loving family relationships. Some friends distanced themselves, unsure what to believe. The stress manifested physically. I developed migraines and insomnia. My husband's blood pressure skyrocketed. The girls began acting out at school, their grades slipping. We began family therapy, which only added to our mounting legal bills. Our lawyer warned us that Mom's team was preparing a larger strategy, hiring a private investigator to document our lives, looking for any ammunition. Every public outing became a potential trap, and every interaction with the girls could be twisted into evidence. One morning, I caught Patrick photographing our house from a legal distance. Cheryl's family group chat revealed their long-term plans, which included waiting out the restraining order while gathering evidence of parental alienation. He made certain I saw him, even waving at the security camera. He was documenting everything, too. We installed panic buttons throughout the house and established code words with the girls. If anyone approached them unexpectedly, they were to find a trusted adult right away. They were coaching each other on what to document and how to present themselves as victims. The weight of transforming my children into cautious, fearful versions of themselves crushed me every day. A week before the first supervised visit, Mom sent a formal letter through her lawyer requesting permission to bring photo albums to share family history with the girls. When we declined, she accused us of cultural erasure and denying the children their heritage. As the visit approached, Patrick became more assertive, visiting businesses near the visitation center, establishing legitimate reasons to be there. He couldn't enter during the visit, but he could position himself nearby, and the law was on his side. I met with the visitation supervisor to express my concerns. She assured me that their protocols were strict, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She had dealt with families like ours before, and she knew how determined individuals could circumvent even the best safeguards. None of us slept well the night before the first visit. The girls sensed our anxiety. Jane frequently inquired if something was wrong. Elise clung to me, and our youngest returned to behaviors she'd outgrown months before. That morning, I dressed the girls carefully, wanting them to seem well cared for, while not giving Mom any reason to keep them away from her. My hands shook as I braided their hair. My husband double-checked the recording device our lawyer had permitted us to carry. The visitation center was a converted house, designed to feel comfortable while maintaining security. We came early to familiarize the kids with the surroundings. The supervisor took the girls to the visitation room while we waited in a separate area. Mom arrived on time, dressed impeccably and carrying a small bag. Her face lit up as she saw the girls through the window, and for a brief moment, I saw the grandmother she could have been if she hadn't chosen Patrick over their safety. I watched on the closed-circuit monitor as Mom hugged them sadly. She had brought approved coloring papers and crayons. For 30 minutes, it appeared to be a normal grandmother visit. Then Mom began her manipulation, talking about missing family events and how sorry everyone was. The supervisor redirected her several times, but Mom was skilled at subtle emotional manipulation. When the visit ended, the girls were confused and upset. They didn't understand why they couldn't see Grandma at her house, or why Uncle Patrick couldn't visit either. The car ride home was filled with questions I struggled to answer honestly without further damaging them. That afternoon, our lawyer called. Patrick had filed his own petition, claiming defamation and emotional distress, stating our false accusations had harmed his reputation in relationships. It was a clear vindictive move, but fighting it would cost us more money. During the second visit, Mom brought a family scrapbook she had compiled. The war of attrition continued. Every legal filing drained our savings. Every harassment incident shattered our peace. Every manipulation attempt harmed our children's innocence. The supervisor had accepted the scrapbook after checking for objectionable content, but Mom had been clever. She'd included images of Patrick at every family milestone, portraying him as the beloved uncle the girls were missing. Our lawyer filed a motion to dismiss the defamation lawsuit, but the judge allowed it to proceed to discovery, which included depositions and documents. The girls absorbed every word, their confusion growing. When they returned to the waiting area, Jane immediately asked why Uncle Patrick couldn't attend the visits if he was so nice. Patrick's strategy was clear: drain us financially while maintaining his victim narrative. The family's coordination reached new heights as various relatives began to show up at the girls' activities. An aunt would show up at dance class, a cousin at soccer practice. They maintained legal distance while making their presence felt. Other parents began to notice the pattern of family members lurking around. Cheryl continued to feed me information from the group chat. They developed a rotation schedule to maintain constant pressure without any individual violating the restraining order. They documented every sighting of us, building what they called their alienation portfolio. 3 weeks after the court decision, I discovered Mom had enrolled in the same gym where I took yoga classes. She attended different sessions, but I always saw her in the parking lot. The girls' behavior deteriorated further. Jane became withdrawn and stopped inviting friends over. Elise's nightmares worsened, but she still couldn't explain what scared her, and our youngest began having tantrums reminiscent of her toddler years. The family therapist suggested that the constant tension was affecting them more than we realized. Patrick's current strategy escalated when he got a job at a hardware store 2 blocks from the visitation center, giving him a legitimate reason to be in the area during every visit. I noticed his truck parked strategically where we'd have to pass it entering and leaving. Mom pushed the boundaries even further during the 3rd supervised visit. She gave each girl a locket with family photos inside, including Patrick. The supervisor forced her to remove them, but the damage had already been done. The girls didn't understand why they couldn't keep Grandma's gifts. Our financial situation deteriorated due to legal fees, therapy costs, and security measures. My husband took on extra shifts while I freelanced from home to avoid leaving the girls with sitters. The stress showed in both of our faces, with dark circles becoming permanent fixtures. Then came the accident, or what appeared to be an accident. I was backing out of a parking space at the grocery store when another car hit me. The driver jumped out, apologizing profusely. Only when I saw Uncle Helen's son did I realize this was orchestrated. He insisted on calling the cops, creating an official report that painted me as distracted and careless. The deposition for Patrick's defamation case was scheduled for the following month. Our lawyer prepared me for grueling questions designed to make me appear unstable. They'd use every family incident, every protective measure as evidence of my irrational behavior toward a reformed man. Mom's visitation requests increased. She petitioned for unsupervised visits, citing the successful supervised sessions, and included affidavits from family members attesting to her character and my unreasonable restrictions. Each filing required a response, which cost money we didn't have. I began noticing cars following me on errands, different vehicles, but always maintaining the same careful distance. When I mentioned it to our lawyer, he said proving coordination would be nearly impossible. They'd learned from the group chat evidence to be more careful. The 4th supervised visit brought new manipulation. Mom spent the entire hour telling the girls about family traditions they were missing, birthday parties, holiday gatherings, summer barbecues, all of which were portrayed as magical events stolen from them. Patrick began jogging past the visitation center during our visits, timing it perfectly to cross our path and waving at the girls through the window while maintaining legal distance. The supervisor documented it, but technically, he wasn't violating any orders. Our home became a fortress of anxiety. Patrick's lawyer interrogated me for 6 hours, questioning me about every decision I'd made since his release. I struggled to explain why we lived as if we were hiding without frightening them or poisoning them against the family they still loved. We added more cameras, window sensors, and kept the curtains drawn at all times. They portrayed my protective measures as paranoid delusions and my documentation as obsessive behavior. I kept my cool, but inside I was cracking. 2 days later, Jane's teacher called with concerns. Jane had written a story about a family torn apart by a mean mother who wouldn't let anyone visit. The teacher recognized the emotional distress and suggested additional counseling. Another expense, another acknowledgement of how this war was harming my children. Mom's next action was calculated. She began attending the same church we'd shifted to after leaving hers. She sat across the sanctuary, dabbing at tears during services. Churchgoers who didn't know our tales saw Grandma split from her grandchildren, and some began avoiding us. My husband suggested borrowing from his 401k, but I knew that would only delay the inevitable. Patrick had hired a second attorney, someone known for aggressive litigation, and the message was clear: they could afford to escalate, whereas we couldn't. During the 5th supervised visit, something shifted. Mom dropped her careful facade for a brief moment. When the supervisor stepped out briefly to use the restroom, Mom quickly whispered something to the girls. I couldn't hear it through the monitor, but I saw their faces change. Jane looked scared, and Elise was confused. In the car afterward, neither girl would tell me what Grandma had said. They exchanged glances but remained silent. That night, I found them huddled together in Jane's bed, whispering. When I entered, they immediately stopped talking. The secret Mom had planned had begun. Patrick filed additional motions in his defamation case, claiming lost wages from jobs he couldn't get due to my slander, and requesting access to my social media accounts, email records, and personal journals. Our lawyer fought each request, but judges frequently favored broad discovery, and the family's pressure campaign evolved. Instead of making direct contact, they started a whisper campaign in our community, sending anonymous letters to parents at school, calling local businesses to question our mental stability, gradually shrinking our world. Cheryl warned me that Mom was planning something for the holidays, and the group chat was filled with cryptic references to Christmas justice and reunion planning. The 6th supervised visit was scheduled for December 23rd. Mom arrived with a bag of wrapped presents that the supervisor had to inspect. Each gift was appropriate. Books, puzzles, art supplies, but each contained subtle reminders of what the girls were missing. That evening, I discovered why the girls had been so secretive. Elise finally broke down and told me what Grandma had whispered. Uncle Patrick had gifts for them hidden at her house. Special gifts he'd made himself. And they could have them if they could persuade Mommy to let them visit. The manipulation was masterful. My children now had a secret with their grandmother. They didn't understand why I was being mean about presents. And Jane accused me of ruining Christmas. On Christmas Eve, we discovered 3 packages on our doorstep, left at 3 a.m. by someone in dark clothing who knew exactly where our blind spots were. Inside were handmade dolls, clearly crafted with patience and skill, as evidenced by the security cameras. The card simply said, "Love, Uncle Patrick," in neat handwriting. I wanted to throw them away, but the girls had already seen them. Taking the dolls would make me the villain who stole Christmas presents. Keeping them indicated Patrick had successfully invaded our home once more. My husband and I exchanged worried glances over the girls' heads as they opened their presents on Christmas morning, clearly thinking about the dolls in the garage and the mysterious gifts at Grandma's house. I made a compromise. I put them in the garage, promising that we'd figure it out later. The day after Christmas, our lawyer called with bad news. The judge in Patrick's defamation case had partially ruled in his favor, dismissing the wage loss claims but finding that I had potentially damaged his reputation beyond the scope of protecting my children, and a trial would determine damages. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the legal documents. We couldn't afford a trial. The retainer alone would bankrupt us. Mom and Patrick had won their war of financial attrition. I had to make an impossible choice: surrender or lose everything fighting. That night, I found my husband in the garage, looking at the dolls Patrick had made. Each was crafted with disturbing detail, dressed like our daughters. The implications made my skin crawl, but legally, they were just gifts from an uncle, and we had no proof of sinister intent. The next morning, Jane's best friend's mother called to say they were switching schools. The drama surrounding our family had become too much, and other parents were considering doing the same. During the 7th supervised visit, I instructed our lawyer to offer a settlement in Patrick's defamation case, despite the fact that the number made me sick. $30,000. As I watched Mom manipulate my daughters with practiced ease, seeing their growing resentment toward me, and feeling the financial noose tightening, I realized I had to change tactics. I couldn't win by playing defense anymore. The settlement came with conditions Patrick couldn't refuse, including a permanent no-contact agreement that went beyond the restraining order. Patrick accepted, probably thinking he'd find a way around it later. We had to liquidate our retirement accounts to pay for it. It felt like paying a ransom to a kidnapper. Mom's reaction was swift and vicious. She filed for expanded visitation rights, claiming the settlement proved I had been wrong about Patrick. But our lawyer had anticipated this, and the settlement included Patrick's acknowledgement that continued contact could be detrimental to the children's well-being. The judge, who reviewed Mom's petition, saw through her manipulation. He observed a pattern of escalating behavior, coordinated harassment, and the use of supervised visits to undermine parental authority. Instead of expanding access, he reduced it to quarterly visits with stricter supervision. Mom's investment in Patrick had cost her everything: her retirement savings, her relationship with her grandchildren, and now her limited access. The family group chat erupted in rage and disbelief. Cheryl sent me screenshots of their outburst. Some blamed Mom for pushing too hard, while others blamed Patrick for taking the money. The coalition that had terrorized us for months had fractured into bitter factions. We used the breathing room to rebuild. Jane's school agreed to put in more security measures. We found a new therapist who specialized in family manipulation dynamics. And we gradually, carefully, began explaining the age-appropriate truth to the girls about why Uncle Patrick couldn't be around them. The quarterly visits with Mom became less traumatic. With stricter supervision and reduced frequency, she couldn't maintain the same level of manipulation. The girls began to see her as a distant relative rather than a central figure in their lives. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. 6 months later, Patrick violated the no-contact agreement by sending birthday cards to each girl through a third party. Our lawyer immediately filed for contempt, and this time, the judge had no patience. Patrick faced jail time or a substantial fine, which he chose, further draining Mom's resources because she was still funding his legal battles. The extended family eventually fled. Without Mom's money to fund their campaign, and with legal barriers entrenched, most found it simpler to move on. A few remained, but their individual efforts lacked the coordinated impact of the group onslaught. On the anniversary of Patrick's release, I sat in my backyard watching my daughters play. We'd paid a terrible price, financial ruin, family destruction, months of terror. But they were safe. Their innocence was scarred, but not shattered. My husband joined me, bringing coffee. We didn't need words. We'd survived by choosing the battles we could win and accepting the costs of those we couldn't. The war wasn't over. As I hugged them close, I reflected on the cost of protection. It would never be perfect, but we'd accomplished what was most important. The girls ran up to us, their faces beaming with joy. They'd adapted to our new normal with the resilience of children, and they now understood why some family members weren't safe, why love sometimes meant keeping distance. Every parent would pay it without hesitation, but few understood the true cost until the bill came due. We paid in money, relationships, and innocence. But watching my daughters play safely in our yard, I knew I'd pay it again. The restraining order would need to be renewed eventually. Mom would get her quarterly visits, and Patrick would most likely probe for new weaknesses. But for the time being, my daughters are safe. I still find it strange how much my mother aged when she lost. Was she truly believing she was doing the right thing, or was this all about control from the start? Sometimes the only triumph that matters is surviving each struggle and preserving what you love most. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever been through something like this? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.